Baruch Hashem, today's Daf Yomi is Menachos Daf Sadi Beis, Menachos 92. Today's Daf Yomi, we start with the Mishnah on Sadi Beis Amid Aleph. Says the Mishnah, Kol Karbanos Hatzibor, all the communal offerings, Ein Bahen Smicha. The communal offerings do not have Smicha, Chutz Min HaPar Habal Kol Mitzvos, V'Sayar Mishtalech, with the exception which is what's typically called the Par Helam Devar Shel Tzibor. Here it's called the bowl that is brought for all the mitzvahs. This is if the community sinned, the majority of the community, on the basis of a mistaken ruling by the court, which, if done intentionally, a person gets kares, they have to bring a bull. So that does not have smicha. And also the goat that's sent out to Azazel, that does not have smicha. What is smicha? Smicha is that before an animal is slaughtered, the owner of the korban places his two hands on the head of the korban, and he leans on it with all of his strength. And the smicha happened in the courtyard of the temple, next to immediately right before you did the shechita, the slaughter. And by korban ola and asham and chatas, when a person would do smicha, he would be confessing his sins at the time of the smicha. But if it would be the korban toda or shlomim, he wouldn't be confessing his sins, but he would be saying divrei shevach, words of praise to Hashem. So all the korbanos of the individual require smicha, with the exception of the bechor, the meiser, and the pesach. And by the communal offerings, there's only two sacrifices that get it, and that's the nature of our sugya here. So the Tanna Kamma Mishnah says that none of the communal offerings get smicha, with the exception of the bull that's brought param davar shel tzibor and the goat of Azazel. Rabbi Shimon says af sa'ir avodas kochavim. It's the goat of idolatry, meaning to say Rabbi Shimon's position is that there are two smichos. They're not three, but even though he uses the language of af, nevertheless, he says there are two communal offerings, because his position is going to be that the goat of Azazel was done by the Kohen Gadol, so it was considered an individual offering. So he's going to say that all three get smichos. The goat of idolatry, if the community sins, majority of the community committed an accidental sin of idolatry, and that requires smicha. Also the param devar shel tzibor, and also the sayer hamishtoleach. Now we say the next line of Mishnah: Kol karbanos hayachet tu'unin smicha. All the individual offerings require smicha. Chutz min habachor v'ameiser v'apesach, with the exception of firstborn, the 10th animal, and the pesach. V'ayoresh, somebody who inherits somech, if he inherits the korban from his father, he has to do smicha, umaybe nisachim, and he has to bring nisachim along with the korban, umeimar. And if he does this act called tamura, where he exchanges the animal for another animal, even though it's prohibited to do that, the tamura takes effect and has the same kedusha as the original animal. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Gemara, Kol Karbanos Hatzipor Ein Bahen Smicha Chutz Mipara Baal Kol Mitzvos. None of the communal offerings have smicha, with the exception of the para Baal Kol Mitzvos, the param davar shel tzibor, the sirei avodas kochavim, and the goat of idolatry. Divrei Rabbi Shimon, whereas Rabbi Yehuda Omer sirei avodas kochavim Ein Bahen Smicha. Rabbi Yehuda says the goat of idolatry does not have smicha. And mi avi tachteim. What will I bring in place of the goat of the idolatry to have this smicha? Sayer amishtalech, the goat that is sent to Azazel. So Rabbi Yehuda says, I need to replace the goat of the idolatry. So he says, I'll replace it with the goat of Azazel, the goat that's sent out. So the Gemara says, why do you need to replace it? Well, why do you need a second korban, second communal offering to have smicha? Where's that coming from? So Amar Ravina. So Ravina's answer is, Gemire, we have a tradition, Shtei smichos betzibur, that there are two of the communal offerings require smicha. Amar Rabbi Shimon, v'alo ein smicha al b'balam. So Rabbi Shimon responds to Ravina, but smicha can only be done by the owner, and there's no owner in this case. V'zeh Aaron ubanav somchem bo. And in the case of the goat of Azazel, that is not being done. That is being done by Aaron and his children, and so therefore they're considered the owners. So it's not considered a communal offering. So that's how. So Rabbi Huda responds to that by saying, Amar lo. Rabbi Huda responds to Rabbi Shimon, Avzel, also the god of Azazel, they're going to be considered the owners. Also Aaron Ubana with copper and bow. And so therefore Aaron and his sons can do it. So therefore they're going to be considered like the Balaam, and therefore they do it. So the Gemara says, let's Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah comes along and says, I'll do it. This dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon connects to a different dispute. Titania, we learned in the Brayse, V'chiparas Mikdash HaKodesh, Zelefnai V'lefnim. So it says in the Brayse, it says in the pasuk about the bull and the goat that's going on the broad on Yom Kippur. It says he has to sprinkle the blood. So it says V'chiparas Mikdash HaKodesh. This refers to the sin of Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, that you went into the temple without realizing your state of ritual impurity when you went into the Holy of Holies. Excuse me. That's Omoed. That refers to Zehechel. That refers to the sanctuary. Excuse me. Mizbeach Kamashmao. This refers to somebody touched the altar in a state of ritual impurity. Yechaper Elu Azaros. This refers to somebody who went to that Zara in a state of ritual impurity. Kohanim Kamashman. This refers to the Kohanim. Al Kohamakal. That refers to Elu Yisrael. Yechaper. That refers to the Leviim. And with those words, Yechaper, Hushvu Kulim Kapara Achas. It's telling us that the Kohanim Levim Israel, and there's one atonement for all of them. Shemiskaper Mesara Mishtoach. We all receive atonement through the goat that's sent out to Azazel. That's the position of Rabbi Yehuda. So we see it from here. That's why. We'll connect in a second. Rabbi Shimon Omer Kashem Shadam Asayir Anas Befnim Achapar Yisrael Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashas. Rabbi Shimon says just like the blood of the goat that was done in the Holy of Holies atones for the Jewish people for Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashas. Kach Damapar. Also, the blood of the bull atones for the Kohanim Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashim. He agrees with that idea that the blood of the bull is atoning for the Kohanim Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashim, and the blood of the goat is atoning for the Bnei Israel for that sin. But he says, my dispute with Rabbi Yehuda is the following: that according to him, the Kohanim also achieve atonement with the goat that's sent out to Azazel for all other averos. But I am of the position that they achieve atonement for the other averos with the confession that they make over the bull. That Rabbi Shimon says, "Keshem shevido shel sayer mishtalech mechaper al Yisrael b'shar averos." It's like the confession over the goat that sent to Azazel atones for other sins for Bnei Yisrael. Kach vido shel par mechaper al kohanim b'shar averos. So to the confession of the bull atones for the kohen for other averos. And so that which Rabbi Shimon says, that since the goat that sent it to Azazel does not atone for the Kohanim at all, so therefore Aaron and his sons are not going to be called the Baalim on it, and so therefore they can't do the smicha. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says the goat that sent to Azazel does atone for the Kohanim also, and so therefore they're called the Baalim, and therefore they can do the smicha. And the Gemara says, well, Rabbi Shimon Havada Yishu, how can the pasuk says that just like the Kohanim Levim Yisraelim have one atonement, because it says if that's the case, also he should say that. So therefore, the Sayer Mishtalech should atone also for the Jewish, meaning to say they all have the same thing. Because according to them, the Sayer Mishtalech atones. So the pasuk says that everybody achieves atonement, but why is he breaking it up that only works for Bnei Yisrael and not for the Kohanim? So the Gemara says in Ushvu the Bnei Kaparnim. When the pasuk says that they are the same, it means that they all achieve atonement. But each one achieves atonement only in his own right. Rabbi Yehuda Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav Yisrael Mechapri. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, the Bnei Yisrael achieve atonement. B'dam Sa'ir Nasa B'fnim. They achieve atonement with the blood of the bull that's done inside. The Kohanim the partial Aaron, and the Kohanim with the bull of Aaron. Mishar of Eros El Mechapri. Whereas with other sins, everybody achieves, according to Rabbi Yehuda, they achieve atonement with the confession over the goat that's sent to Azazel. Rabbi Shimon Bashar Veros Nami Kohanim Bavidoy de Parmaschabri. According to Rabbi Shimon, the Kohanim also achieve atonement with the other sins with the confession over the bull of Aaron. Like we learned in the Brisa, that they all have the same halacha with respect to the Sar Mishtalech, that they achieve atonement. And that is for the sin of Tumas, Mikdash, V'Kedashim. Ma ben Yisrael Kohanim, Kohen Mashiach. What's the distinction then? The blood of the bull achieves atonement for the Kohanim, for Tumas, Mikdash, V'Kedashim. And the blood of the goat inside achieves atonement for Bnei Yisrael for Tumas Mikdash V'Kedashim. So Rabbi Shimon Omer, Yishim Shedam Asir Nasib B'Pnim Mechaper Al Yisrael, Kach Tamapar Mechaper Al Kohanim. Rabbi Shimon says that just like the blood of the bull of the goat that's done inside achieves atonement, so too the blood of the bull. They're the same there. And then Rabbi Shimon says, Kishem Shavidu Shel Ter Mishal Mechaper. So just like the confession over the goat achieves atonement for Bnei Yisrael for other sins. Kach vidoy shalpar mechaper al kohanim. So too the confession of the bull achieves atonement for the kohanim for the other sins. Tana Rabbanan v'samchu ziknei ha'edes yideim al rosh hapar. Now it says in the Brisa, the ziknei ha'edes lean their hands on the heads of the bull. Par ta'un smicha. This teaches us that the bull of Par Davar requires smicha. But the goat of idolatry does not require smicha. Rabbi Shimon Omer par ton smicha bezikenim. He says the par requires smicha by the elders. But the goat of idolatry does not require smicha by the elders. It's Aaron who does it. So the Gemara challenges. This brisa from a different brisa, Veraminu, because there's a contradiction between the two brises. The different brisa says Veraminu hachai. It says in the pasuk that Aaron places his hands on Rosh Hasir Achai. Achai. What does this teach us? Achai ton smicha ve'in tzirei was chum ton smicha. That only the goat that sent to Azazel requires smicha, but not the goat of idolatry. That's the position of Rabbi Yehuda. So far, no contradiction. Rabbi Shimon Omer chai ton smicha ba'aron. That the chai requires smicha by Aaron. But the goat of idolatry does not require smicha by Aaron, only by the elders. Where in the previous price it says that Aaron is the one who does the smicha on the goat of idolatry. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this contradiction? One price, Rabbi Shimon is saying that Aaron is the one who does the smicha on the goat of idolatry. When the second brisa, he says that it is the Zikanim. So Amrav Sheishes the Tizbera Dahach Kamaisa Mitarasti. Do you really think that the first brisa, which says that Aaron does the smicha and not the elders, is correct? V'Amar Shimon smicha b'Baalam be'inan. That smicha needs to be done by the owners, and Aaron is not the owner in the goat of idolatry. It's the Bnei Yisrael, so of course it's not correct. You have to explain the price as follows. That it says par. We see from here par ton smicha vein sirus avot chachamim tein smicha. That the bull requires smicha, but not the goat of idolatry. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Shimon Omer chai ton smicha achai ton smicha ba'aron. Chai requires smicha ba'aron. The goat that is Azazel requires smicha ba'aron. Vein sira was chachamim tein smicha ba'aron el b'zikanim, but not the goat of idolatry. And this is Rabbi Yehuda. And this is how Rabbi Shimon is. This is how the conversation goes. The goat of idolatry requires smicha. And if you want to say that it doesn't require smicha, ba'aron who the shmielach that was me. That all meant was not that it doesn't require smicha, but it doesn't require smicha by Aaron, like the goat of Azazel. Chayu, and it's excluded by the word achai. So basically, that Rabbi Shimon is saying, if you're going to what you heard that doesn't require smicha, doesn't mean it doesn't require smicha by the elders, it meant it doesn't require smicha by Aaron. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, why does Rabbi Yehuda have to take a pasuk to say that Aaron doesn't do smicha on the goat of idolatry? There are two smichos in that are communal offerings, and so since we have a smicha on the goat of idolatry, on the goat of param on the bull of param on the goat of Azazel, so obviously there's no smicha for idolatry because otherwise there were three. So the Gemara says. So why was Rabbi Shimon say that according to Rabbi Yehuda he needs to exclude it? So he says girsa ba'alma, meaning to say that's just a reminder. It's not really the pasuk is not a real limud. It's just a reminder for Rabbi Yehuda of how he has this, how he gets to this conclusion. So the Gemara says Rabbi Shimon chavim divides smicha minoan. How does Rabbi Shimon know that the goat of idolatry requires smicha? Gemara says nafka amiditanya. He learns that from the following price of samach yado al rosh here. It says about the goat of the Nasi. He places his hands on the head of they place his hands on the head of the goat. Rabos Sayer Nachshon Smicha. Comes to include the goat of Nachshon for Smicha. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Now, it's telling us that the goat of Nachshon Naminadav at the time of the dedication of the altar requires smicha. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Tzira Vos Cham Smicha. To tell us that the goat of idolatry requires smicha. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol Chatas Shenichnos Tamo Afnim. Any Chatas whose blood went into the Holy of Holies to unin smicha requires smicha. Why do we have to have this additional statement of Rabbi Shimon? Says it. The Simon Ba'alma. The Gemara says. That's a simon to remind us, just to remember. And maybe the pasuk is telling us that the goat that was done inside on Yom Kippur is what requires smicha. Nasi. So he says no. The Gemara answers it needs to be similar to the goat of the Nasi. The mechaper averos mitzvah you do it has to atone for a specific sin, and the goat that was done inside on Yom Kippur does not atone for a specific sin, but it atones for Tumas Mikdash V'Kedashav, and it just suspends it until you know for sure you sin. According to Ravina, why we need the pasuk of Achai if we have the two smichos? So according to Ravina, we need a pasuk. And we need Alach Moshe Sinai. The Mikra, if we just had the pasuk, Avamina, Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor, I would have said that the carbon shalom of the community, which is the two sheep that are brought on Shavuos, they require smicha. Kikash Yamas Nisan, Dahach Pirka, they call Menachos pasuk. Unusually, the Gemara here is citing another chapter in Menachos, and that's why. Some say that this is a later edition of the Sofer Orayim, but that this piece of the Gemara, because we said Kol Menachos Bos, and we learned to Amar Shimon Shlosh Minon Tuna and Shalosh Mitzvos, that there are three karbanos which require three aspects associated. Each one of them, there's a total of three mitzvos, and you match them up. Two of them with all three have two mitzvos associated with them, and you have to match them. And there, Rabbi Shimon said that the individual shlomim required smicha while they're alive, and the tenufa chaz of a shok after they're killed. But they do not require tenufa while they're alive, whereas the shalmei tzibur requires tenufa while they're alive and tenufa after they're dead. And there the Gemara said, "V'yu zivchei shalmei tzibur tuun and smicha." Why don't we say that the shalmei tzibur require smicha mikal v'chomer? Ma shalmei yachad shein tuun and tenufa mechayim tuun and smicha chayim. Just like the individual shlomim that does not require smicha that does not require tenufa while it's alive, requires smicha while it's alive. So too, for sure, the Shalmei Tzibur, which require tenufa while they're alive, for sure it requires smicha while they're alive. So for this reason, it's Hilchasa. We have to say it's Halacha Moshe Sinai. Hilchasa lo yadin Chaim. If we just said Halacha Moshe Sinai, we wouldn't know which one of the communal offerings get smicha. The Mashman, the Dumya, the Sire, the Nasi, the Mechaper, Averos Mitzvah Yedua. So that's why we have to say from the pasuk it has to be similar to the goat of the Nasi, that it atones for sins that are known to us. Okay, we'll stop here. This is the Daf Yomi for today, Menachos 92, Baruch Hashem.